acting on non-agendized items. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on an item that is not on the agenda? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. All right, and then shall I keep the time, Ms. Ramberg, or I can do it on my phone if you'd like.
I'm happy to keep time.
Okay, perfect. Great. Thank you. That would be helpful. All right. So let's see. We'll do 1.5 minutes for Chris Chang. Please unmute.
Thank you. Honorable REI Subcommittee, I really, it's just knowing your meeting, I think has been amazing progress. An item I just wish to bring to your attention is the role of history and how the committee and the City Council can make small gestures to help educate the community on Mountain View's long history with the Asian American community, particularly down by Villa and View, where the Chinatown used to exist. Some towns have put historical plaques or done sign namings about putting Chinese with the English signs. And while it'd be a small gesture, I think that this crisis requires a combination of little efforts that together make a safe community. And I think that a plaque in downtown Mountain View, where the Chinatown once existed, would remind Mountain View residents that Asian Americans have been here for a long time and help counter that stereotype of that perpetual foreigner, or that we have just arrived now. I think a lot of Chinese residents at the rally last week were surprised to learn that long history themselves. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Great, thank you very much. All right, I don't see any other hands raised. So we can move it back to the committee, and we can move on to item 4, which is minutes approval. We don't have any minutes to approve, so we can move on to item 5, which are our business items. So we can start with 5.1, which is to discuss efforts to address xenophobia and anti-Asian American and Pacific Islander sentiment. This item includes a subcommittee member update on our community engagement and intergovernmental efforts, an update on the Santa Clara County Board referral to address anti-Asian American and Pacific Islander hate crimes and violence by County Supervisor Otto Lee, an update on the Santa Clara County Hate Crimes Task Force by Councilmember Abe Koga, and lastly, a Mountain View Police Department update on hate crimes, policy incidents, and outreach by our police chief, Chris Shun. Subcommittee members will ask any questions they may have following each of these presentations. The public comment period will follow the conclusion of all of these updates. I'd now like to turn it over to our city manager, Ms. Kimber McCarthy, to kick off this agenda item and provide a brief update on our Race, Equity, and Inclusion Action Plan efforts, which is included as attachment 1 to this agenda item. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor, Chair Kamei, and committee members. What I want to do now is give a brief update on some of the efforts that we have made since Council adopted our Race, Equity, Inclusion Action Plan. So just as a reminder, there are several categories in our, I'll just say the REI Action Plan. And the first category is assessing police practices and policies, and really related to accountability. So we have had a couple cohorts of our MVPDX educational forum where we have members of the community that are engaged in a few weeks and a series of sessions with our police department, really learning and listening with each other and taking feedback from the community and learning about our police department and operations, and also gives our police the opportunity to hear feedback and have a dialogue with our residents about what they're hearing, what they're thinking, what they're seeing, what they're feeling. So those 2 cohorts have been successful, and I know that we are launching other ones. We also have our PhD research fellow that is working with our police department and city manager's office and looking at our data related to stop and arrests, and particularly looking at the racial statistics of that data. And our research fellow, Alex Stevenson, is going to be really looking at what the data means. So trying to look at not only just the numbers of the data, but actually applying that research lens to the data to really try and understand what it means and understand the story behind it. We also, the council just recently concluded the recruitment of the public safety advisory body. The recruitment was conducted in March and interviews also in March, and the formal appointments were made just in this past council meeting in April. So we expect the first meeting of the PSAB, as we call it, to be held sometime within the next couple months. Then another category as related to our action plan is to look at our internal operations and policies under an equity lens. So one of the things that we've been doing as part of the current budget development process is looking at all of the requests from departments for any new budgetary projects or items through this budget equity lens. And essentially what that means is the budget team has asked questions of each department whether their budget requests benefits or burdens any people or communities of color, or also low-income communities in Mountain View. Another project under the internal operations is to look at historical zoning and land use planning. So the council is embarking on a robust assessment of our R3 zoning, which also includes displacement policies, and that's underway right now, and council discussed that at our last council meeting last week. And finally, we're also looking at implementing trainings to our staff citywide via the Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center. And these trainings are related to cultural humility and other sorts of diversity training. So there are a number of efforts that are underway right now as related to our action plan in total. And so tonight's item is really specifically about what we can do to address xenophobia and anti-Asian American and Pacific Islander, so AAPI sentiment. So council is asked to consider adding items to this REI action plan that I just talked about that specifically address xenophobia and anti-AAPI sentiment. So staff has presented the subcommittee with some options. And of course, we would love to hear the subcommittee's ideas, maybe if there's any new ideas, or also about those options that are presented. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor. And the first item up, as you mentioned, is an update from the subcommittee on any community engagement and intergovernmental affairs. So I will turn it back over to you at this time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, City Manager McCarthy. I think it's helpful, since we haven't met since December of last year, to hear the update on all the efforts the city has been making. Really appreciate that. So in terms of the member update on our community engagement and intergovernmental efforts, I think this was just, I believe for the three of us, Councilor Robbie Koga and Vice Mayor Ramirez, if we had any updates on our own efforts on xenophobia and anti-Asian sentiment. And I know that since the last time we met, the council reaffirmed our commitment to the AAPI community with putting forward our resolution again this past February of 2021. And I just wasn't sure if we had other items to share. So I'll look to the two of you if you'd like to add anything here. Councilmember Abikoga.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if you're looking for just, official city activities or other. I think we've been engaged in a lot of other activities, and I thought I would just share that. Part of having this meeting today I was to be able to talk about what's been going on and what actions have been happening in the community. I've been, despite the unfortunate incidents that have been really quite saddening and maddening to many of us, I have been really become hopeful by the action and the community, AAPI community, and their allies really standing up and becoming more vocal and taking action to stop the hate, as that's been the hashtag. So I know the mayor and I, as you probably know, we did the op-ed, and that was actually the newspaper had reached out asking us to do that. So I was very pleased by that invitation. And we've been participating in rallies. I think all of us on here have been doing the tour. But I think that has been really, for me, really unifying. I actually just came from another presentation by Russell Jung, the director of the StopAAPIHate.org organization that's been recording, incidents, and he did a presentation, and he used the word flocking, that you can fight or flight, but another action that's taking place is that we're flocking as a community, coming together and showing support for each other. And I think that's really what these rallies have been, and at least in my perspective. And so it's been very heartening in that way. I want to thank Chris Chang, school board trustee Chris Chang, who joined us today. He was very instrumental in the rally that we put on April 11th, and getting our youth to take the lead on that. And I think hearing the youth voices was very powerful. And I hope that, I know there's some video of it on Instagram of the youth speeches, and they were just very moving and powerful, although again saddening to hear about how 10-year-olds and 8-year-olds are really scared. They're scared to go out to play, and I think we all as AAPIs have been feeling that fear, but it's just especially saddening to hear that from our young folks. But I also, as mentioned, I'm part of this American Leadership Forum network, and they had this presentation at an hour ago, and Supervisor Lee, who's on here, was over there too. So I think it's just been really great to see the increase in education, but also the need for that. Last night, actually, Chief and Mayor and we participated in the Mountain View Wisdom School District panel. They call it The Talk, about Asian Americans and the model minority myth and so forth. And there were about 100 people who were on the call. And I think just to be able to share our stories and share also the history of Asian American Asian American history, as well as anti-Asian sentiment here. It's not new. It's something that has happened over our history as a country. But I feel, and I've always felt this over my lifetime, that it's not very well known. And I hope that we can expand the knowledge and understanding that unfortunately racism is prevalent, and it's touched many communities, including the Asian American community. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Abe-Coca. Vice Mayor, did you have anything that you'd like to add for our community engagement and intergovernmental affairs efforts?
I don't have anything else to add. I think Councilmember Abe-Coca summed it very well.
Great, thank you so much. I think the only other thing that I'd add to our engagement efforts is the chamber and many of the small businesses in our downtown last week had a Dining for AAPI event over a 2-day period, with various proceeds going to StopAAPIHate.org, which has been the organization I think leading a lot of the efforts that we're seeing. And I just wanted to share that too, because I think one of the questions has been what are the action pieces we can do? So I think that's just one collaboration there. Okay, so any questions on the city manager's update or these updates here? For item A, all right. Okay, seeing none, I'll move to item B, which is our Santa Clara County Board referral to address anti-Asian American and Pacific Islander API hate, crimes, and violence with our county supervisor, Otto Lee. Hi, Supervisor Lee, it's good to see you. Look at that fresh haircut.
Well, good afternoon, Mayor Ellen Kamei and our good friend Margaret Abakoga, and also Lucas. And great to see our chief, Chief Shong, and also great seeing you again, Ms. Rambach, for the kind invitation to be speaking with you today. Truly, it's an honor to be speaking with you as your supervisor, and it's sad that I'm coming here because of the reasons why I need to talk about this issue, and I would like to just bring a little bit of an update of what the board supervisor has done since I've joined this board in December. You know, the timing is everything in life, right? And I said the same thing to Chief Chris as well regarding, you know, it's you know, we don't plan this, right? But the moment is here, and it's really momentous time. We're here, and you know, all these things happening, you know, just like the verdict coming out with George Floyd's a murder, right? That you really see this continued systemic violence against people of color all across America, and that's why taking action on these type of work is so important, and it's really about saving lives. And of course, we need education, whether it's ethnic studies at the high school level, but you know, we need to educate everybody. And the more of us able to talk and go around to explain these issues to people, I think is so important. Because at the end of the day, we're not really trying to throw people in jail or lock people up. That's not really our goal. Our goal is really make sure people understand that there's that we with the Asian faces are just as American as anybody else. And certainly there's a lot of work that we need to do in that regard. To give you some update as to the referral and what we've done at the county, we actually proposed this referral back in March, and to come back in May 5th. May 5th is the meeting, and excuse me, May 4th. So I look forward to making sure that our word get out so that more of a community will come out. A quick little background. I mean, I'm sure many of you already know about this, right? Since the beginning of the pandemic, our Asian Americans have been targeted by this alarming surge in this anti-Asian bigotry and violence that we've seen all across the nation. It really started kind of innocuously, like, you know, you see that Chinese restaurant people are not going, right? Because people are afraid of Chinese food for a while. You start hearing that way back before our own lockdown. And then, you know, for more than a year, we keep seeing these type of misinformation and stigma wrongly associate Asian Americans with the virus. And so we see dirty looks, right? And then it becomes verbal assaults. And of course, now it's escalated to physical attacks and violence. And people say, well, why is it like that? And I think it's a lot to do with the fact that we are now opening up, right? Early on, I guess people don't associate as much because we were locked down. We can't really be out there. But now that people are out in the community, I think that's why the reason we are seeing a lot of this. And somebody said this, I'm going to quote him, that, you know, this is truly not new, right? This is just a new chapter in a very old book of this Asian discrimination we've had. And the Stop API Hate is documented like close to 4,000 of these hate crimes, right? That's been reported in just this past year. And then I always remind people, you know, this is not about freedom of speech, right? It's not really mental breakdown either. It's systemic racism that's rooted in white supremacy. The action that we've taken, so in December 2020, when I first joined the board, we first voted on the resolution against hate crimes and also created the hate crimes task force that Councilmember Abakoga is sitting on, right? And I'm honored to say that I'll be joining you on this task force as well. And then in March 2021, we first put together a resolution on March 9th to basically denouncing and condemning against the Asian American Pacific Islander hate crimes. And the very next day, right, on Wednesday morning was when a Filipino woman was attacked at the Diordon station, right, 6:30 in the morning, not even 24 hours we voted for it. So clearly just a resolution is a good start, but doesn't really, have teeth to it in terms of action. So the next meeting is when I put together a referral to try to do more anti-racism community outreach, education campaign, and try to find ways to talk about like bystander training and whatnot, what type of funding we need to kind of put some money behind these efforts, right? In April, our board actually authorized and approved in a referral for $10,000 of resources to get like safety alarms and lanyards for distributing to Asian American elders in the community. And that was passed unanimously. So as I said earlier, on May 4th, we are going to receive the updates from the county staff on the status of these referrals and what type of procedures and recommendation we're going to come up with. So specifically, what we asked for is that we asked the staff to provide options conducting the anti-racism community outreach and education campaign to address these anti-Asian sentiments, crime, violence in the community. That includes a work plan. And then next, we also asked staff to do a progress update and recommendations to move forward with the recommended comprehensive work plan that resulted from the 2016-2017 hearings on the rights of immigrants, women, hate crimes, and violence. So this is really not new, right? These are things that the county has been doing for a while. But now we're going to try to, let's make sure we have the foundation of what's been done and built on top of it. And then, of course, we also need to get a copy of all the federal and state legislative proposals regarding these issues to make sure that we are working together in solidarity with our state and federal leaders. So what I've heard back from the staff as of yesterday, working on this, is that the staff has already developed a framework, a combination of both immediate and long-term strategies to work on these issues. For the short term, okay, the staff is focusing on the community engagement and communications effort, which include paid media campaign, right, community listening sessions, and bystander trainings. The hate crime task force meeting, I believe the next meeting, Margaret, is on April 30th, right, next week. And I believe the task force will receive a more detailed presentation on the communications and these community engagement activities that will be undertaken. The longer term strategies will be expected to be shaped by the hate crimes task force to require greater coordination with other entities like law enforcement as well and the DAs. And these are the activities that will be geared toward the prevention of these incidents in the long run, reporting and supporting of our victims. While this referral was really intended to focus more on the immediate strategies of the API community, ultimately it really is about supporting hate crime victims of all races against all racism. And so just want to make sure people realize, I mean, I always say this, but hate against one is hate against all. So let's not try to put a wedge issue between us and other ethnic communities. This is really about everybody. And so I'm very honored to say that these are the efforts the county is doing. And I want to applaud what Mountain View, what your city has been doing. I was at the rally last week. It was very well attended, very well done. Certainly, we didn't have enough time to talk. I tried to stick to my 30 seconds. I might be the only one. But in any case, no, it is really the time, and there'll be a lot of education ahead. And I just want to say thank you for all you're doing. And it's truly an honor to speak with you today.
Great. Thank you so much, Supervisor Lee. And I think one of the things that the city of Mountain View did, and I can't remember if we shared this or not, is, we wrote in a letter of support about your referral. And so we're happy that passed unanimously, I believe. So thank you so much for being here. So I want to open it up to my colleagues in case they have any questions for Supervisor Lee about his referral, or perhaps the county is working on. Do either of you have questions for Supervisor Lee? Great. All right.
Good. Easy group.
I saw the Vice Mayor's hand first. So we'll start with Vice Mayor Ramirez and then Councilmember Abicoga.
Thank you, Mayor. This is one of those questions that I think is challenging to answer because it's so expansive, but I think many of us have been struggling to find a way to meaningfully respond to this challenge. From the county's perspective, what can each city do to help, complement or supplement the work that you're doing? If there were asks of the city of Mountain View, what would you have us do?
Right. So the passing of the resolutions that we talked about, something that I think many cities have already started doing, which is, like I said, it's a good start, but we really need more action. Partly is there's the law enforcement side, right, where making sure that our police officers out there are taking this very seriously. I mean, you certainly have done that in Mountain View, for example, the incident that happened on Castro. That type of incidents, and again, it's not like everybody has to be arrested if they say something dumb and stupid and racist, right? But the fact that, a police officer, taking this seriously and have a little talk to with these individuals, I think would help, setting the baseline, what's acceptable and what's not, right? Bystander training, I think, is extremely helpful because a lot of times when you talk to the victims, they were like, yeah, of course we were shocked and unhappy with the perpetrator. What's sometimes even more shocking is people standing around who didn't do anything, right? They just, as if it's okay, whether it's a supermarket setting or grocery store, So it is so important to have those resources made available. And there are many of these resources. There's no really very minimal cost. A lot of these training is actually online for free. iHollaback is one of the websites that have done these type of training, and we're not trying to get people, get into fights and, get hurt, right? That's not what we want. But there are certainly things that we can learn to educate and de-escalate. And I think it's so important to make sure that we take those seriously. But in the longer term, I mean, obviously there's some preventions, as in like for the victims, we allocate some funding to give out these kind of a modern whistle, right? So whistling, these are the devices that you press a button, it gets really loud, scare people away, right? So these are type of devices I think we could do very short, like a short-term basis. So I would certainly advise doing so. And some cities are doing their own citizens patrol and whatnot, right? I think they have some in Oakland, I've heard, and maybe even some in Japantown as well here. But ultimately, I really think it's important that we want to make sure that our community feels safe, and I think it's really important to reiterate it so that our own residents who've been living here for decades. I mean, my mother-in-law was saying she was afraid to take the bus, and I said, "Oh, you don't want to, afraid of COVID?" It's like, no, I'm afraid of being beat up, right? So you could tell those are the fear that people have. And we really need to make sure that that those messages is clear, that we want our own family members to not feel that fear walking around the streets. So those are things that we definitely can do. There's never enough of it, but I think talking to the schools, taking the time to talk to kids and the next generation, I think is a really good investment of making sure people understand. And the other one issue that they want to mention, I think it was mentioned to Margaret, we're listening, is the issue of the international dimension, right? North Korea is still building more nuclear bombs, right? Chinese Communist Party is taking some very, very totalitarian steps in Hong Kong and suppressing democracy and freedom of speech and all that. So it is, in my mind, it's perfectly fine for us to have, disgust or displeasure about these type of policy for these countries. But that has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the ones looking like Asian in our own soil, because we are all Americans. I think the point needs to be made that I might not look the same as you, I'm not white, but I'm no less American than any of you are in that sense. So I think that those are the messages that is so important to reinforce. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Abe-Koga.
Thank you. And thank you, Supervisor. It's so great to have you join us. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. And I'm just really so excited that you are on the Board of Supervisors and doing all the great work you're doing. And thank you for leading on this issue. Vice Mayor had asked a similar question that I had, and I appreciate your answer, but I was wondering if you have any thoughts on specifically with Asian businesses, what we might be able to do. As we were in that earlier presentation, the presenter mentioned that Asian businesses closed before sheltering in place took place, because they're just seeing a low a decline in business, and then job loss too for APIs is the second largest next to the Black American community. So just wondering if you have any thoughts on what we could do to support our Asian businesses.
Yes, oh, absolutely. I think one of the things that we've talked about regarding the reporting of the hate crimes is that we're also seeing like broken windows type situation with restaurants, Chinese restaurants, Asian businesses, and we certainly have been taking those report very seriously. One of the things that I have found is many businesses don't want to report. They just kind of like, oh, I just replaced window, it's okay. Well, no, it's not okay. We really need and I think it's important to remind them that by reporting it, the chance of them having that happen again is actually less, because there's a bit of a deterrent to let people know that you can't get away with it, right? Especially these days with cameras everywhere, a lot of these things could be tracked. So I think it's important to tell the businesses that they really are not alone, and we are definitely with them. In terms of the lower, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, right before the lockdown, I mean, many of Chinese business, like Chinese restaurants, many of Asian restaurants have already been suffering because of the fact that of these views. And I think we are coming up with various business loan program, and I'm really hoping that some of these loans could become, we call forgivable loans. So basically it becomes a grant at the county level to help our small business to recover from COVID. And I really do think that there's the issue relating to hate crimes and victims of hate crimes should also receive these type of financial support as well for businesses, to make sure that they would only not survive, but come back strong from this pandemic coming out.
And do you have thoughts on whether the county might maybe engage in doing more tracking of these incidents, similar to stopapihate.org, but doing it at a more granular level, countywide?
Yeah.
Is that
Exactly. Yeah.
One of the referral items is going towards?
No, exactly. So when we say we're engaging more with the public safety and the district attorney's office, we certainly are asking them to provide more data for us to learn based on these incidents, to see what type of incidents. I mean, there's so many right there. They might not be hate crime, right? For example, somebody go and swear at you or something like that with hateful messages, racist messages, but that is still a racial incident. So I want to make sure that those issues are being kept track of, so that we know where they are, how is it happening, in order to figure out what we need to do to try to educate, to lessen these impacts. Hopefully, after we have our May 4th meeting, we'll be able to get some directions to our public safety, and I hope that's being kept track as well at the city level, because besides the county sheriff is only a small part of the public safety of a county. We have 15 cities and at least another close to a dozen different public safety organization. Like Mountain View have your own police department, and Sunnyvale has the public safety. So we really want to make sure that these type of crimes and incidents are being kept track of.
Great, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Margaret.
Great. Thank you so much, Supervisor Lee. My colleagues have asked you really good questions. I would say, as our subcommittee and the city is looking to stay engaged on this topic, what's the best way for us to get that information? Would your staff be sending it? Should we just track the board referral, or
yes,
what's the best way for us and the public watching to kind of track things?
Yeah, exactly. So from the city's level, our staff will be forwarding these information when these items comes up. So as I mentioned, May 4th is our next meeting, and we'll try to get the staff report out about a week, usually it's about a week out before the meeting, to get the word out. So as to get more community engagement and more public to speak on it and what we want to do, because whatever the staff proposed is basically a proposal. We really want the community outreach to come up with the solution. So we, as you know, being in the government, a lot of us elected officials, we absolutely do not have all the solutions. Even though some people think we think we do, but we definitely don't. So the community outreach is absolutely crucial for people to come and tell us what more we can do besides what's been recommended by staff. So I will definitely be getting it out. I'm trying to engage more with my social media through Twitter and Facebook, but at the same time, our staff should also be reaching out to all the different cities, the 13 cities that represent our county, and hopefully we could get the word out and come up with some concrete action and solution. Whether it might be funding is needed, that's fine, but we just need to identify what they are. And surprisingly too, one thing I learned being on the county now is that a lot of times there's funds. It's just a matter of knowing how to ask for it and how to get reimbursed. So don't let the funding be a concern to stop you from doing something good, because, like for example, with COVID recovery, there's actually so much funds coming from the federal government, and we are trying to definitely make use of it. And arguably, this type of work might be able to fall into those categories.
Great, thank you so much. I really like too that there will be a community outreach component so that residents throughout the county can provide feedback. I think that that's really, really important. So great. I think that's all of our questions, unless anyone has anything else for our supervisor. All right. Well, thank you so much, Supervisor Lee, for making time out of your busy schedule to come and talk about your referral. We really appreciate it. Obviously, the City of Mountain View supports you in your work, and we look forward to continuing to engage. And we'll be sure to share that information with the public as you share it with us too.
Thank you so much. Madam Mayor Kamei. I'd like to hear that. All right. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks. Have a good night. Appreciate it. Bye. See you. All right. So that concludes item B. We can move on to item C, which is the Santa Clara County Hate Crimes Task Force. And Councilman Robert Koga, if you'd like to take this one, since you'll be sitting on the task force, we'd love to hear more. Thanks.
Thank you. Actually, I think Supervisor Lee gave a great update on the work of the task force. We've met twice so far, and I serve as an advisory member, so I'm actually not one of the voting members. There's 17 of the voting members, and then many others who are there in an advisory capacity. But so far, it's been mostly taking testimony from various community groups. Our first meeting, we had a presentation from I just blanked out, but the organization in Southern California that tracks hate crimes and provided data nationally on where we are as a country. And then I believe our next meeting, as mentioned, will be the 30th. And that's the plan is to take testimony again from community groups about resources for victims, I believe is the focus. So out of all of this, there's a work plan. As mentioned, Supervisor Lee mentioned some of the plans, the direction that the board plans to take. So yes, I will definitely keep folks posted and see where the city might be able to participate in some of the activities. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So Vice Mayor, do you have any questions for Councilmember Abe Koga this item?
I guess just one quick question. Sometimes it's not easy for the county to share the good work that it's doing with the public. And I'm curious, is there anything that we can do to help inform Mountain View residents about the work that the committee is doing and maybe participate if there are opportunities for public input?
I think that's a great suggestion. I don't have an answer. I think I would have to go back to the task force and ask them what they would recommend. Certainly the meetings are all public. The agendas are publicized on the county site. I don't know if we could link that to our REI site on our website, if that would be helpful. Definitely a public comment is always welcome. And I think they have a very expansive list of community organizations that are participating. So it seems like it's very inclusive, but there's always room for more of that. So maybe we can start with linking from our website to theirs. Thank you, though.
Okay, that looks like that. Those were the vice mayor. That was the vice mayor's question. So I just had another quick follow up. So do you think that if we link from what the county has, we'll see who the task force members are? Because
there's a list. It might be on their first agenda, but there is a list. I'm happy to follow up with staff. I can provide what information we have.
Yeah, I think as we're talking about this item, you know, as the vice mayor was mentioning, just putting that information out there would be helpful, because I think I knew there was a task force, but I wasn't sure of like the composition or the different members. And so having links to the agenda and seeing who's on there, I think would be really important, especially as we're talking about hate crimes, but also racial equity, right, and inclusion. That would be great. Okay. I don't have any other questions. It sounds like the groups met once and then we'll be set to meet again. So they'll be, they're met twice and then there's a third meeting coming up. Okay. All right. So more to come on this item. Cool. Anything else for item C? Okay. All right. Seeing none, we can move on to item D, our Mountain View Police Department update on hate crimes, policy, incidents, and outreach. So I will turn it over to our police chief, Chris Shung.
Good evening, Chair Kamei and subcommittee members. As I share my screen, wanted to confirm that you can see the presentation.
So I think you want to go maybe full screen, or because we're seeing.
Okay, did it just switch to full screen?
Not yet.
Looks okay. How about now?
Well, I think that it, we still see the next slide queued up, but I guess if that's okay, if you don't mind us seeing your notes.
Yeah, that's fine. Apologies. I actually rehearsed this right before we came on and that didn't happen, but I'll just go ahead. It's a brief presentation, and I just wanted to outline a couple different things. Obviously, hate crimes is something we take extremely seriously. I wanted to update the subcommittee on a couple of the incidents that have happened in 2020. On March 5th, we did have an incident downtown where there was a person who went into one of the local stores on Castro Street and tried to steal something. When confronted by the Asian store owner, there was some racial epithets and discriminatory language used, and that person left, and then did the same to someone trying to have a meal further down the block on Castro Street. Ultimately, our officers were able to locate and arrest this person after they were identified. It is unfortunate, but we were able to do a pretty thorough investigation, as well as working with the district attorney's office. And then a few weeks later, unfortunately, we had another incident at the McDonald's off of El Monte. In this case, someone came into the store and the restaurant unmasked, and when confronted by the employees, they really went into a tirade and berated the employees there based on their Hispanic background and ethnic diversity there. So it is disappointing, and I think it's also it dawns on me that we do know anecdotally of other incidents that are likely unreported in our community, and this is why the police department remains committed to wanting to outreach to our community, all of our community, through a variety of different methods, and I'll go into that here. But before I do, I just wanted to touch a little bit on our policy. Our department, and what may set us apart from some other law enforcement agencies in the country, is that not only would we receive a report but that we actually have an affirmative duty to outreach to our various minority groups in our city, but also an affirmative duty to investigate all reports of hate crime. And when we do so, we not only take the case from a patrol officer level, but our detectives get involved and take a second pass and a very detailed look at often doing follow-up investigation and interviews, as well as contacting our counterparts at the district attorney's office to ensure the case meets all of their standards and if there's any additional follow-up that's needed. Lastly, I just wanted to touch on our efforts of why we feel it's important for the police department to continue. And I'll focus my comments here tonight on our efforts to the AAPI community in Mountain View. Over the past year and a half, we've actually held a couple different virtual town halls in Mandarin to the Chinese community to address a variety of different concerns and issues that the community has. I know Councilmember Abekoga and I participated in a Chinese radio interview on a Chinese radio station last year on similar topics. And in the recent past few weeks, there's obviously been a lot of interest in the AAPI community, which has transformed into a lot of different invitations for PD staff to be able to share about our efforts, such as what I'm sharing with you all tonight. And lastly, I just want to highlight the work of our city's multicultural outreach program. And on the screen, you can see Ivy, one of our Mandarin translators, who's been really instrumental in helping us outreach to the Mandarin community. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions the subcommittee might have.
Great, thank you so much, Chief. Does the subcommittee have any questions for the Chief? Okay, I see the Vice Mayor shaking his head no. Councilmember Abekoga, any questions for the Chief?
Yes, thank you. I was hoping you could explain how you investigate. So some of these cases were originally not reported by the victim, and some where the victim didn't want to necessarily press charges, but then it sounded like you went back and redoubled and worked with the DA. So how does that, what is the process, or how does that work? Do you do that with every incident, or is it hate crimes in particular, or did you?
So in any sort of, let's say any crime, right? The officers will know to listen and ask questions. And the key differentiator for hate crimes is the ability for us to prove that the crime itself was committed, at least in part, or the victim chosen based on that person's race, ethnicity, protected class status. And when that happens, that triggers the kind of a hate crimes protocol where we will go not just kind of ask about what happened and what crimes there might be, but that now the next layer that we go back to is interviewing not just the victim, but ideally the suspect to find out, well, what was your state of mind? Minus that, and this is the difficult part in the media where by virtue, you hear a lot of statements of, by virtue of the victim being, let's say, a minority, it should automatically be a hate crime. That could be the case, but a successful prosecution hinges on the ability to prove that in the court of law. So that's why it makes it just a little bit more difficult. And this race of a victim alone, we could arrest for it, but we want a successful prosecution as well.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Chief. I just had one quick question. So you touched a little bit on businesses and perhaps hate crimes happening at our minority-owned businesses. And I was just wondering if you could expand a little bit for the subcommittee and the audience about what maybe are there new things that the police department's doing in terms of seeing this rise in xenophobia and anti-Asian sentiment, and how you're maybe patrolling the Asian businesses or doing outreach. I know we have a new neighborhood services officer. I'd love for you to be able to expand a little bit.
Sure, thank you. Yes, in addition to we have a neighborhood and event services unit, which focuses primarily a lot on either homelessness issues or these kind of high profile type of incidents. So in addition to that unit, we've had a lot of officers get out on foot downtown. We realize it's been a concern. I myself walked downtown and listened to a lot of the concerns the business owners had. So being visible is one thing. The other thing that we're pretty excited about is we're closely watching the county restrictions on gatherings and what we can do, because I really do look forward to the day that we can begin hosting activities such as the Coffee with a Cop. But in this case, with the emphasis on addressing and answering any questions the public or the business community might have on AAPI issues or hate crimes against them. We hope and we're planning for maybe a month or two from now, and obviously very flexible on when we can launch that, but that is in the plans on outreach into the community, both in person, online, through our various different channels.
Great, thank you so much. I see we've prompted the Vice Mayor for a question. Go ahead, Vice Mayor Ramirez.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I just remembered I wanted to ask about this. Supervisor Lee talked about the importance of bystander training, and as I was thinking about it, I think there's a lot of value in providing some kind of programming to that effect, because it can be really difficult. Even if if you're witnessing something that is wrong, it's hard to stand up. So to what extent, can the City of Mountain View or MVPD help provide that kind of training? Are there, educational materials that we can provide that not only stop AAPI hate is important, but no less important is step up when you see, your neighbor, being assaulted? But what can we do to help supplement maybe some of the county's work on that?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Yeah, we can certainly follow a model that we've done in the past. And again, this all comes with the caveat of restrictions on opening up and gatherings. So if we can safely abide by that, we look at some of the rape defense assault training that we've had in the past and co-sponsored that or put on the training. The name escapes me right now, but there are quite a few different nonprofits that do the bystander training that we can explore and see about hosting it at the police department or co-sponsoring or whatever it might be, obviously with the very Mountain View centric focus. And if the restrictions prevent us from doing that, we can certainly be very adaptive and look at a virtual version of that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And I just had one more question for you, Chief. I know that you had mentioned doing things virtual, online, social media. So can you also share a little bit about what the police department has been doing to address, this topic virtually?
A lot of them right now is we haven't actually held a anti-AAPI hate crime type of town hall, or so to speak, but I think we have been in talks with our multicultural outreach team that I referenced earlier about what that might look like in the coming months.
Great, thank you so much. So more to come.
Yes.
Do any other subcommittee members have questions for Police Chief Shang? All right, thank you, Chief, appreciate it. So this concludes our presentations for item 5.1. So I'd like to turn it over to a public comment. This meeting is scheduled to end at 7 p.m. So in order to ensure we hear from all of our speakers and progress through the meeting, speakers will be allowed to speak for up to 1.5 minutes. Would any member of the public like to provide comment on item 5.1? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. And for this subcommittee meeting, we don't have a timer like we do or a screen timer like we do in our council meetings, but Ms. Ramberg is kind enough to help us with the time. So just keep an eye out for her. All right, I see a hand raised here, and Tim McKenzie. Go ahead and unmute, Tim.
Oh, hey, I didn't expect to be a panelist. Great to see you all. I just wanted, it's good to hear about all these things. Actually, heard about the supervisor, the resolution passed by Supervisor Lee. They actually happened to do it at the same meeting that they were providing period products in all county bathrooms. So I spoke in support at that one. And as I'll bring up something that I mentioned then, there's this program or this group, Compassion in Oakland, where community volunteers can go and volunteer to walk with elderly members of the Asian community so that they can feel safe going on walks. I have to bike everywhere. It's real tough to get to Oakland, and I'd love to be able to help in my community. That seems like an active way that Mountain View could take some steps and help build community support. I just wanted to bring that up to the subcommittee. Thanks for the work you're doing.
Great. Thanks so much, Tim. Okay, so that looks like all of our public comment. So I don't see any other hands raised. So I will move it back to the subcommittee for questions and feedback. And I know that there was some staff recommendations in the document, so I'm not sure if staff wanted to talk about that now or if you'd like to hear the subcommittee feedback first.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I think let me just pull up the recommendations. Let's go ahead and just let committee members know what those recommendations are. And then hopefully that will help in your discussion or questions. And then I'm also going to ask our assistant city manager to help if I'm missing anything. So what the subcommittee was presented with is 3 ideas that we had that you could add to the REI action plan, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. The first thing, which you all have already talked about a little bit, is to collaborate with nonprofit organizations to coordinate the harassment prevention or this bystander training that we've been talking about. Another option is to organize a panel presentation by local AAPI small businesses for ideas on how to help local AAPI small businesses. And of course that could, be expanded if you wanted it beyond just businesses. And then another idea is to compile and share information with the community about various events that are going on and just making sure that we are raising awareness as a city, demonstrating our support, providing feedback on events that are related to anti-AAPI sentiment or xenophobia. So that is what staff presented, and I would ask our assistant city manager if she has any other information specifically about the bystander training that we might be able to share with the subcommittee.
I would just acknowledge the things that subcommittee members and Supervisor Lee mentioned, that there are organizations who have developed trainings. I know there are members of our community who have participated in such trainings, and so we wouldn't need to reinvent the wheel on that. We would partner. We have a number of different ways that we deliver events like these to the community, including the ways that our Human Relations Commission does CRTs and other kinds of town halls and events. So that's one of the options that the subcommittee may wish to pursue, of making a referral to the HRC to have something like that as part of their work plan.
Great, thank you so much. So at this time, do subcommittee members have any questions or feedback about the suggestions or anything of the 4 items we discussed tonight? Councilmember Abe-Koga.
Thank you. So as far as the recommendations go, I think they are great. Definitely sharing information is, I think, would be very helpful in this whole process. I continue to realize how little information people know. So whatever we can do to share is important. I would say in terms of bystander training, I took the Holla Back training. Bystander training is a virtual training, and thought it was really good. So I don't know if it's something like that we can encourage people to do on their own, or I'm not sure what a Mountain View specific one would look like, but if there is something that could be more tailored, I think that would be great. And yeah, it was helpful because it gave you, there was like 5 Ds, I can't remember all the Ds, but different ways to approach an incident if you see one. So it's not always having to like go in the middle and intervene. So I think that was just very helpful for me to understand. And then the panel presentation, I think that's that focusing on small business is a great idea. I really enjoyed the panel we were on last night, and I was thinking about that. And frankly, when we started REI last summer, and with the Black Lives Matter movement, the interest for me was to really deal with race equity, broadly, not just focusing on one sector. And part of that, I guess I had a vision of doing listening forums where we just have folks throughout the city, residents, business owners, talk about what it's like to be Black or Latinx or API in Mountain View. And just wanted to maybe put that out as another approach, because I think at the end of the day, it's really about sharing our stories. And the chief mentioned it last night, and getting to really, know each other, understand each other as neighbors with different backgrounds. But that sharing of stories is what makes us familiarize ourselves with the history of our races, as well as just us as individuals. And hopefully in that way we can foster more, mutual understanding and combat racism and hate in that manner. I really appreciated again, Trustee Chang's idea or a suggestion about a plaque. We have historic plaques of, the first city hall and downtown and so forth. And I didn't even know that there was a small Chinatown or Japantown in downtown Mountain View. But it makes sense because some of the buildings actually have some of the remnants of the look, the design of that. And so I thought that would be really, a nice touch to be able to add that to our downtown as well. So I would like to recommend that we pursue that idea. And then the other area that I guess this becomes more of a referral back, but and I know that our Youth Services Committee is scheduled to meet, but when we talk about hate and these incidents, I've been reading articles about how with like the AAPI incidents, half of the incidents reported have been by youth, and then 80% of those have been incidents at schools. And so it ties back to our efforts around mental health. And I guess sorry, my dogs just got excited. We started down that path, and I know I think we have it scheduled to review where we are, but in light of what's happening with these hate incidents, I just think it's that much more important that we continue to put efforts into combating or to addressing mental health needs in our community, and understanding that there is a race, there's a race piece to that issue as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Vice Mayor Ramirez.
Thank you, Mayor. So I agree with everything that Councilmember Abeykoga said, and I agree with the staff recommendations. Just, I guess, a few other ideas or expanding on some of those thoughts, I think one of the things that I've been really impressed by is the importance of trusted community organizations in the response to the pandemic and the sort of COVID relief effort. And I think, the city has done a great job. The county has done remarkable work, but really a lot of the success, I think, has come from partnerships with organizations that hard to reach communities trust, right? And so partnering with the faith community and partnering with nonprofits, that are led by, by community leaders who can speak the language or, who have some kind of tie to a group that we really struggle to reach for whatever reason, language barrier or, just government sometimes has a particular approach that works for us, but doesn't work for everybody. And I think extending that approach, and identify, it's going to be hard work because I have a suspicion there are a lot of organizations out, even within Mountain View that we don't, as a city, have a relationship with, churches, that are very, that have a sort of a niche focus, where there really hasn't been a need to engage the city for whatever reason. And probably other organizations I'm not even thinking of, but I think we need to build a relationship with them at some point, just to help reach communities that we're not going to reach any other way. So I like the idea of looking at, at building an inventory, who is in our community and how do we reach out to them? And I know MVPD already is doing some work within the faith community and reaching out to some of the churches that maybe historically you haven't had a chance to work with directly. But I think that's going to serve us very well, building that foundation so that way we can leverage that when we're trying to communicate with long-standing residents who never really have had a relationship with the city in any other way. So I think that's terrific. I agree with Trustee Chang's suggestion to recognize some, historic cultural resources, or at least, commemorate the history. I think, if there's an opportunity to work with the Historical Association, maybe we can leverage, some of the, the people power and resources that they might be able to bring. To the extent there's something that we would need to do as a city council to initiate that, I'm fully supportive, and the bystander training as well. I'd like to think that I have the intestinal fortitude to stand up if I were in a situation, where I'm observing a crime, but I think it's a difficult thing to do, and I would love to better understand exactly how you would approach a situation like that, and to make sure that we educate our residents for how to step up when they need to. A couple of other ideas that are not mine. I've had a lot of conversations over the past few months to sort of better understand how I can be helpful. It's my approach really has been like, this is a chance for those of us who want to be allies to listen. And I had a really enlightening conversation with a good friend of mine who was making a case that I hadn't really thought about, and that's the Latino community, the Latinx community has something of an advantage in being able to have a language in common, right? I don't speak Spanish, but folks within my community do, or we don't have that linguistic challenge that the AAPI community has, where it's not a monolithic community. There are dozens and dozens of languages and dozens and dozens of very different cultural backgrounds, and and while you might have a community you can I'd like the term flock to sort of come to, if you're part of if you're Asian but you're not from one of the larger groups. My friend is Thai, for instance. There isn't as robust a community presence, I think. It's very difficult. Like you might feel solidarity, but you might not have the same type of community presence because you just don't have, there just aren't as many, as many Thai people in this area. And he was sharing, I know this is something that's come up, over the past several years, but the importance of the disaggregation of data and making sure we really know, which communities are impacted and the sort of the assets that they have, their needs, how government can respond. I think it's a big challenge, but it's a really important one. And I don't know exactly how we can make some movement there, but I feel like it's really important to not just, characterize sort of AAPI community, but also really to understand, all of the demographic groups that sort of comprise the broader community, because, there are just many different ways of reaching out to them that we're probably not fully appreciating. It feels like a really important thing to better delve into and better understand. And then the last thing that Mayor Kamei, I think, shared this idea in 2019, and I think we need to revisit it, but a leadership academy. We have the Spanish language one. I think expanding that to, we've got a large Mandarin speaking community in Mountain View, but using the opportunity to help build leadership and strengthen, communities built around a different language other than English within Mountain View, especially right now, feels essential. I think it's a good opportunity for leaders within each of these communities also to, those who have access to government to get the information and the resources and support that they need and share it with their own communities. So I'd love to revisit that and implement, I think, a program that would have a lot of value in Mountain View. But beyond that, I support I think a lot of great ideas here and would love to learn how I can be helpful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Robert Cook, are you good? I saw your hand up and then it went down. Okay, the Vice Mayor said what you wanted to. Perfect. All right, great. Well, first things first, I think that I'm just really grateful that Council has this subcommittee, because I think when Councilmember Abikoga, when you started this, you had the bigger vision. And I think not everybody saw that vision that you did about wanting to be kind of broader and inclusive than just to a singular item. And I think here we are a year plus later, and I just see the utility and the value of Council having a vehicle and a place to have these types of discussions. So just wanted to put that out there and thank you, but also to say to our greater audience, that Council is interested in all forms of equity and trying to do what we can to play our role here, because I think what we've seen in this pandemic is the reliance on local government more than ever, and maybe local government needing to take a role more so than they ever thought before. And one of the things that I heard today, which I can't believe it's taken me this long to read it, which is we're facing a dual pandemic. One of them is the COVID-19 pandemic, and the other is this pandemic of anti-Asian sentiment and xenophobia. And I thought that was pretty accurate kind of summation of what I also see. So I think when it comes in terms to the staff suggestions and the staff recommendations, I'll start there first before I tack on anything else. So, I'm supportive of the compiling and sharing information on our REI website. It's been so extremely helpful in my point of view to be able to link everything there and share it with community members, share it with other electeds who are saying, Mountain View is doing great. What are you doing? Can you share? It's just been a one-stop shop resource, and especially as we've been virtual. So I definitely support that in compiling whatever we can. Also supportive of collaborating on harassment prevention and bystander trainings. And I'm open to if we just want to have it on the REI website, or if we want to work with local nonprofits. I know that I think CARE has done one in the past. And so open to staff suggestion on that. I think for the third bullet item, I think a little bit less of organizing a panel presentation for AAPI small businesses and a little bit more on a resource guide. So one of the things I noticed when I was walking the downtown with the chief is that our Asian-owned businesses don't want to call 911. But they do want to know who they can call. So, whether it's a collaboration with the chamber and the city, who can they call if they see something happening? And I know we've been talking about having that for the mobile crisis response team, because I think in some of these instances, there's been a mental health component. And I think there's a non-emergency line I know that the PD has. And so perhaps it's providing that or letting them know there's a neighborhood resource officer or that the REI exists. I don't think a lot of our small business community knows that our ad hoc subcommittee is around and working on this issue. So I think that would be more of what I'm looking for. I think a little like card or flyer that we could leave with our AAPI businesses in particular, or even, our non-native English speaking businesses, because I'm sure all of them are looking for resources as they're kind of seeing the heightened tensions in the community. So I guess that's the little tweak I would make to the third bullet. And then, really grateful that the vice mayor is memorialized the idea that I had about the Mandarin Language Leadership Academy. I think at the time, part of the feedback I received was that there wasn't a need, or there was it wasn't rising to the top. And, I think with our new census numbers that will be released, we're going to be over 30% and perhaps 35% Asian American Pacific Islander. So I do think that it would be imperative to have that opportunity too. So I think part of what we discussed last night in our panel with the school district was the kind of invisibility to the xenophobia that's been existing because of the model minority myth. And so I think being able to talk about this in our Mandarin Language Academy could be extremely helpful. As well as, I'm hoping that for MVPDX, for the next iteration, I'm assuming there's a class 3, the next class 3, that we would also be able to talk about perhaps how PA responds to hate crimes and what the city is doing in conjunction with the county with the hate crimes task force. I think it'd be really great to have a synergy there for MVPDX in terms of the curriculum. And then last item that was brought up was the historical context, and really appreciate Trustee Chang talking about the history of our city, and liked the Vice Mayor's idea that we can work with the Historical Association and what we can do to capture the presence and the history that we do have in Mountain View of our AAPI community. So I think those are my items. Does anyone have anything else in terms of questions or feedback? All right, I'm not seeing any, and I'm hoping, Councilman Bobby Koga.
Just a process question. So these recommendations and the additions, do these need to be brought up on Tuesday during our work plan discussion, or will they be included? I'm assuming there's going to be some budget appropriations needed for some of these items.
So thank you, Council Member. Yes, so I was going to say we've heard quite a few things. So it's too late to have on the staff report because the agenda will be published soon. But I do think that for example, the Mandarin Academy, which I think our assistant city manager was going to be able to speak to, the bystander training, the inventory. Some of these are just going to take a while, just because they'll require more staff resources to do. So if you're open to it, I think what would be easiest is for staff to go back and take all of the feedback, figure out how we can do it and what we're actually capable of doing. Audrey, would you be able to talk about the Mandarin Academy piece?
Yes, certainly. My recollection of the discussion when the mayor brought up that idea of building on the success of the Spanish Language Academy, the viewpoint of our multicultural engagement program coordinator, that's our new name for it, was that we were at an earlier stage in our relationship building with the Chinese speaking community and trying to understand what their needs and interests were and what format would work best for them, and not a lack of interest in doing it, or and certainly recognizing the importance of having the leadership development and the relationship building with the Chinese-speaking community in the way that has been so beneficial to the Spanish-speaking community. And I think since that time, a lot of that relationship building has been happening. And the staff in the multicultural engagement program are looking at how would they structure a Mandarin Academy and what the timing for that would be. I don't have specifics on that, but it is on the plate for that team.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Abikoga.
Do you have a sense of when we might know what the timeline would be? I know with COVID, it's probably hard to do. I mean, I guess we could do it virtually, but ideally it'd be better to do it in person. But are we looking at this fiscal year or the following fiscal year? If there's some sense, I think that would be helpful.
I agree that it would be nice to have a ballpark, but it isn't a conversation that I've engaged with the team on, so I don't even have an estimate of that, but I'd be happy to have that conversation and get back to you.
Councilmember, I would just say, I don't think it would be realistic to have this fiscal year by the end of June. So I think we would, you were probably meaning maybe next fiscal year or the year after. Yeah, I think we're just going to need to talk to the team and find out just what the planning would involve, the resources and all that. As Audrey mentioned, we'll just have to have that conversation about it. And just kind of brainstorming, thinking about timing. Although these items won't be included in the staff report that's coming to council on Tuesday, excuse me, what I'm thinking is we may be able to just kind of talk about a couple of them that we think may need to be added and the timing. So it wouldn't be, written out, but perhaps we could just mention it in our presentation. I do think there might be some things couple things we may have to vet further that we may not be able to do right now, but I would want to talk to staff about that.
Okay. Councilmember Abikoga, your hand's still up. Are you good?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Persistent on this, but is it something that us as a committee, normally, will recommend items to the full council? Do we need to do that this evening, or are we, or not?
Councilmember, yes, I think that would be appropriate. But it sounds like, let me summarize what we've heard. But like I said, I do believe that staff is just like all of the other items that were on the work plan. We, haven't had a chance to assess them. I do think we are going to need to take time to do that. So what we've heard is the plaque in downtown, some sort of community forum for residents to talk about their experience, referral to the CYSC, and specifically about youth or incidents that have happened and addressing the mental health needs. the Mandarin Academy, openness to some sort of bystander training, whether that's linking to organizations that are already doing bystander training. That actually may be the most feasible or realistic, but that's something we'll look into. And then I also heard interest about the inventory or resources, which I do think that would also take quite a bit of time to do. So there are some things here that I think we can incorporate as part of the work plan. And I do think there are other things that would just honestly would take quite a bit more time of staff resources with all the other things that are going on. So you could refer these items to council. But like I said, we haven't quite assessed them without being able to go back to staff yet to ask about the capacity and constraints. So I guess I would ask you, are there maybe 3 or 4 items that you feel the most strong about that you'd like to put forward? Because I think there's about 6 or 7 things that might be helpful if you have, you know, like some top items that you would like to refer to council.
So City Manager McCarthy, I'd just like to kind of step in here, which is when something I found useful when we were looking at this with the council youth services committee is staff took all of the suggestions that our subcommittee had. They evaluated what they could absorb within the budget. And then they also ranked things as short-term, long-term, and kind of maybe TBD in the future. And that's what the final report was. And that's how it came back to council. So I think rather than our subcommittee ranking things at this point, I would prefer to go through that process, which is you've heard different ideas from us. You can see what can be absorbed naturally into the action plan, and you could do that in terms of the short and long. And then you can look at things maybe that are a parking lot to be investigated further in the future. That process worked quite well with our youth services subcommittee, so I would suggest that process. And hopefully my colleagues are open and amenable to that. I see them shaking their heads. Great, and a thumbs up from the Vice Mayor. Great, thank you. I also wanted to take this opportunity to have a point of clarification, which is I understand that sometimes when we have subcommittee meetings or council meetings and we have ideas and council brings it forward, it's natural to think about the workload implications. It's natural to feel the stresses of what that might mean. I think in terms of the subcommittee today, we're just having a discussion. And so I think rather than automatically turning and pivoting to a place that's a little bit nebulous, I think council was asked for if they had questions and feedback, we're providing it. We look to staff to help us kind of, you know, see the grass through the trees or whatever the analogy is. I also think it's really important to note that when a certain subcommittee member says something from their recollection about how something was prioritized, that there's an openness and there's a willingness to absorb that, and that that also doesn't need to be a discussion. We can just absorb and we can take that in, because perhaps people's sentiments are different on certain policy topics, and that's just natural and that happens. But, you know, I just want to clarify that, you know, my recollection of the process is different. That is the takeaway of the sentiments that I had when I brought this item forward, and that I'm not looking for an explanation. I'm providing feedback and a suggestion, and I would just love it to be at that. And I just, as we're talking about xenophobia, as we're talking about anti-Asian sentiment, as we're talking about the microaggressions that communities of color face, that also feels like a microaggression. And I just want to put that out there. So if there's no more discussion or questions about this item, then I think we can move on to item number 6. Is that okay with the subcommittee? Great. So this is time for subcommittee and staff comments. Does anyone have anything to share for this item? All right, so I'm seeing none. And I think that means we can move to item 7, which is our adjournment. So this meeting is adjourned at 6:32 p.m. and we will reconvene as staff tells us. All right, everyone, have a good night. Thank you so much.